This is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Businessweek Daily with Carol Masser and Tim Stenivek, live on Bloomberg Radio, television, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
All right, kicking off this Thursday here in the surveillance studio. I'm Matt Miller, along with Alexis Christoforous. We are filling in for Tim and Carol. We're not.
I can't believe they gave them the same day off.
Yeah.
Therefore, we are here.
Whoever's in charge of scheduling.
I don't know.
Dropped the ball. And the same is true at the White House, right? I mean, Caroline Leavitt is out, and she's got a rotating cast of characters filling in for her.
And today we're going to hear from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Actually, any moment now on when he begins speaking in the press room there at the White House. We're going to bring that to you live. We can see a live picture of the podium right now. And we don't know exactly what he's going to be talking about, but there is certainly a lot of economic data for him to sift through if he so chose to. We got the PCE, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge today. Coming in, month over month, a little cooler than expected.
In terms of inflation month over month, but year over year, it's still up. The PCE number, 3.8%. That's a full percentage point higher than we were just in February, right? Which is just 4 months ago. And we've seen the fastest 2-month gain in inflation as measured by PCE since 2021. I filled up my gas tank the other day for my Dodge Challenger Scat Pack wide body.
Cool car.
It was $6.56 a gallon.
It's like you're in California with a price like that.
All right, we have Jordan Fabian right now, a White House news editor from Bloomberg, to fill us in on exactly what we can expect to hear from Scott Bessent. Who, Jordan, as Alexis mentions, there's a lot of economic data today, but he lately has seemed to assume the role of Secretary of State as well as Secretary of Defense, wading into topics that a Treasury Secretary normally wouldn't touch.
Yeah, that's right, Matt. He's got his hands in a lot of different pots. China is another one. He was accompanying the president on his trip to Beijing and had a wide portfolio as far as tariffs and all of the business deals they were discussing. But today he's going to be pressed, I believe, on the economic data that was out this morning. You were just talking about it. Higher inflation. He's started to wade into some Biden-like territory, saying this is transitory. The gas prices are going to go down once this conflict in Iran is over. Of course, all that remains to be seen, and he'll have a lot to answer for an administration that came in to office elected to bring down those prices. They've only continued to creep up. And also the conflict in Iran itself. What is the status of the deal making there? There was a report this morning that we've confirmed that there's a tentative agreement, memorandum of understanding to extend the ceasefire. What does that look like, and what are the chances that President Trump is going to sign off on that? All those questions are likely to be posed to the Secretary of State this afternoon.
I'm also wondering if he's going to touch on our new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, because you have to think that these numbers this morning, these PCE numbers, are not going to change the narrative for the Federal Reserve, that, Wall Street is still banking on Fed rate cuts, or rate hikes, I should say, rather than Fed rate cuts.
Yeah, that's right. And he's going to have to, I think, tread carefully a bit, given that the president in the swearing-in ceremony for Kevin Warsh tried to set the tone to say, hey, we're going to allow him to be independent. I know that was a concern for investors and people on Wall Street, bond investors, et cetera. All the interference that happened under his predecessor, Jerome Powell. If you have Scott Bessent coming out hard here and demanding rate cuts, it's going to certainly set them perhaps on a collision course again with the central bank, just as Warsh is taking power. I would expect him not to go there, but certainly it could come up, and he'll have to be careful how he answers the question.
I mean, I can imagine with the Axios report, and now Bloomberg has confirmed that we've got some kind of memorandum of understanding to extend the ceasefire that isn't, right? I mean, we continually fire throughout this cease. Most of the questions will center around the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a couple questions of let's say a deal is consummated, can they get Hormuz back to what it was on February 27th? and how fast can they do it? You've heard all kinds of reports that there were sea mines put in there, that Iran is talking to Oman about a tolling system. Is it going to be freedom of navigation, or is it going to be restricted? How does it look like? And also the broader context of you have a deal that possibly is giving U.S. sanctions relief to Iran, essentially to put Hormuz back to where it was, without getting to the key reasons why the president said he went into this conflict in the first place, which was to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. A lot of that is left to be negotiated later. So that seems to be a loss for the president there. How does the Secretary of State explain that?
And certainly there were reports this week that it might take 30 days to open the Strait of Hormuz if and when a deal is finally signed by the two sides. Is that what you're hearing, Jordan?
Yeah, it's quite possible. I think there's a lot of practical considerations to go through, like the safety of navigation, the freedom of navigation. Like I was just mentioning, are they going to continue to impose tolls, or will ships be able to transit? What role is the U.S. Navy going to have? We've been hearing persistently that they would maybe look at escorts through potentially dangerous areas. Are they actually willing to do that, or is that viewed as too dangerous? So it seems to me that 30 days they would need at least to work out some of those practical questions to get the Strait back to where it was pre-war.
All right, Jordan, we're going to keep you with us as we await Scott Bessent at the podium there in the White House. Right now, though, I want to get over to Charlie Pellet for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Charlie?
All right, thank you very much, Matt and Alexis. We are looking at a mixed day right now for the U.S. equity market. The S&P, NASDAQ, they have both been higher for most of the day, but the Dow swinging between gains and losses. Lower right now, retreating from a record down 29, looking at a loss now of just about 0.1%. S&P pushing further into record territory. 75.65 where the index stands right now, up by about 0.6%. NASDAQ also at a record, up now by 1%, up an additional 252 points. All of this with the SOX advancing 1.6% and the VIX below 16, the 10-year 4.45%, the 2-year 4.02%, and the 30-year 4.98%. Gold up 1.3%, 45.13 the ounce, while West Texas Intermediate crude, let's call that flat on the day at 88.71 a barrel. Brent crude 93.60, a drop there of 0.7%. Coming up after the close of trading, we will be hearing from Dell and Costco. And Matt and Alexis, that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thanks very much. Charlie Pellet there with a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Matt Miller. I guess I'm in for Tim.
I would think so, and I'm Alexis Christoforous in for Carol Masser today.
They are off right now, and we're waiting for, as we have been saying, Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury. He's filling in for Caroline Leavitt, who is off today. It's really interesting that they put different cabinet members in place for the White House.
Interesting that he's the one today, though, because it's a day of very heavy economic reports, and he's going to be asked questions by reporters about the administration's handling of the economy as we move closer to these midterm elections, with gas now at its highest level in a couple of years.
Yeah, it's something that I think a lot of people notice, especially around Memorial Day. Let's get back right now to Jordan Fabian, Bloomberg News, White House editor. Jordan, what do you think are the most important economic questions facing the White House? I mean, President Trump did come into this second term with a goal to reverse the Bidenflation, as the Republicans call it. And although we're not at 9% on CPI, we're still far above the Fed's target. And today's PCE number came out at 3.8%.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a good opportunity to take stock now that we're more than a year since the inauguration of have they lived up to the promises. They have a number of problems, obviously the self-inflicted problems of the war driving up consumer prices, and also looking at, how have they tried to rein in government spending? It doesn't seem like they've done that. In fact, the signature tax bill they passed last year actually increased spending. And so I know that government debt and deficits is something on the minds of folks when we're talking about inflation. They haven't really taken a big bite of that problem, despite all the promises that were made early on about cutting the size of government with Elon Musk, Doge, et cetera. So, if we get into some deeper questions, those are some of the issues that might be raised there in the briefing room.
We also saw the unemployment lines get a little bit longer last week, right? Initial jobless claims up by 5,000. Also, first quarter GDP revised down to 1.6%. That's from that initial reading of 2%. I'd have to think, and we're going to be going to him in a few seconds, he's going to be asked, Bessent, about the state of the economy.
Certainly, the job market has been pretty resilient, but there are some pockets of weakness. And look, overall, you look at some of the surveys from the Conference Board, CEOs that I think are starting to wonder, is this economy actually strong? Like, what is going on, and do we need to pare back?
All right, Jordan, we do see Treasury Secretary Bessent walking out to the podium. Let's listen into him filling in for Caroline Levitt.
Next week, so I don't want anyone yelling, reclaim my time. So let's start out with Trump accounts. Trump accounts, I believe, are the most important benefit for young people since the GI Bill. Today, the app is now available on all major platforms, bringing the president's vision directly to American homes. Nearly 6 million American children have been signed up for Trump accounts, which will launch on July 4th. And I would encourage all of you to go to trumpaccount.gov to sign up. We had a historic tax filing season. We passed the largest tax cuts in American history. The average refund this filing season is nearly $3,300, an 11% increase from last year. And importantly, very importantly, 62 million returns, 44% claimed at least one of the president's signature tax cuts. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime. The reduced taxes on Social Security benefits. 85% of our seniors paid no taxes, and the auto deductibility on loans for American cars. And to remind everyone, Democrats, every Democrat voted against those programs. We've had sustained and resilient GDP growth. Real GDP has risen 2.6% over the past 4 quarters. Atlanta Fed's GDP now predicts 3.8% for this second quarter. The U.S. energy dominance, part of our resilience stems from our energy dominance. Natural gas is down, is my belief, and the futures market is showing us oil will be lower than pre-conflict levels. We are more resilient to energy price fluctuations due to President Trump's energy dominance and deregulatory agenda. The United States is now the world's largest energy exporter. The United States has never exported so much energy or produced so much energy. Main Street prosperity, the average 401k is up almost $30,000 since President Trump's inauguration. President Trump RX has already saved Americans over $600 million. I'm sure all of you will want to report on that. And the unemployment rate remains low at 4.3%. So with that, I'm happy to ask some questions. I will mention 3 weeks ago, I got an honorary degree from the University of South Carolina. So if you really want to get a question, you can call me Dr. Bessent. So,
I want to start with these Trump accounts. There's a lot of people, a lot of working class Americans that maybe don't have the financial expertise when it comes to stock markets and investing in general. In what ways are you guys simplifying this for all those Americans so that it's not just for one class of people, but all Americans can have it?
Well, that's a great question, because 38% of Americans have no exposure to equities. They don't share in the great innovation, the machine that is the American economy, our great capital markets, which drives our prosperity. So if your child is born during President Trump's administration, Treasury puts in $1,000 as a seed investment. We've also created 6 learning pods, so you can go online to the app that went up today and learn. And I think that this is going to be, I've been a big proponent of financial literacy, and I think this is going to be one of the greatest real-time financial literacy educations in history, because it won't be, there's a street in New York called Wall Street. This is what I don't really understand what happens there. American family is going to be able to look on their phone every day and see. And I think it's going to drive people to try to understand what they've got here. I think we're going to create a generation of shareholders. So Ed.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I guess first, well, we're starting to see the disruption of the oil supply and through the Strait of Hormuz affect economic data. First, is there a deal on the table for a 60-day ceasefire to continue that? And then second, how fast could inflation then recede or retreat, or is inflation sticky? Because the PCE was at a 3-year high.
Well, first of all, PCE today, month over month, was 0.2, which was, we're looking at decimal points, but the estimate was 0.3. So 1 month doesn't a trend make. And what we've seen is actually oil prices are down about 10% in May. There are almost 2,000 ships waiting to come out of the Gulf. And I think the oil market is going to be very well supplied on the other side of this, and that we could see prices come down very quickly. We saw the UAE leave OPEC. So I would expect on the other side of this that gasoline prices will follow.
Is there an agreement on the table?
Sorry?
Is there an agreement with Iran on the table?
The teams have been going back and forth. And President Trump has made it very clear, he talked about it at the cabinet meeting, that he has several red lines. And Iran has to turn over their highly enriched uranium. They cannot pursue a nuclear weapon. And the Strait of Hormuz, back to your question on energy, has to free transit. Navigation of the seas has to be free and open as it was before. So he's not going to take a bad deal. He's going to make a great deal for the American people. So, Peter.
Thank you, Dr. Bessent.
Yep.
How long until we see your signature next to President Trump's face on a $250 bill?
Well, again, as Treasury Secretary, I have 2 mandates for U.S. currency. At present, no living person can be on U.S. currency, and the currency must say, "In God we trust." So right now there is proposed legislation in front of the House, in front of the Senate, to change the first requirement so that a living person, Donald J. Trump, could be on a $250 bill. So it's all in the hands of the, it's all up on Capitol Hill. So at Treasury, we prepare things in advance. So we have prepared in advance that if the legislation is passed, but we will stick to the law.
And something that came up yesterday also at the cabinet meeting, President Trump said, Oman will behave just like everybody else, or we will have to blow them up. Are you guys back there in the West Wing making plans for a new war with Oman?
Again, I think the president wanted to punctuate freedom of navigation in the Strait. I had a call with the Omani ambassador this morning, and he assured me that there were no plans for tolling the Strait. As he said, our countries have had 200 years of good relations. He wants to have another 200 more. And I told him that this was a non-starter, and he did not want to risk either the Omani individuals or Omani financial institutions getting sanctioned.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Is it in the U.S. interest to waive some sanctions on Iran or to unfreeze some of their assets before Iran has made concrete promises about getting rid of their nuclear program?
I'm not going to preview the deal, but I would think that the things would go very slowly in terms of that. So we'll see.
Just to follow up on that, because it's our understanding that the U.S. has committed to discussing the matter of sanctions relief during this negotiation period. So just to be clear, is sanctions relief for Iran on the table?
Again, it is a multifaceted agreement, and nothing is going to be on the table until we see the Strait of Hormuz open and the Iranians agree that they have to turn over the highly enriched uranium and that they can't have a nuclear program. And to be clear here, that this administration, President Trump, has done something that no other administration has been able to do. We have gotten the Iranians to talk about their nuclear program and to perhaps commit to not having one. That has never happened before. It had been off the table. So I think when you look at the results of the kinetic action of our economic pressure, it has worked to bring them to the table and have a discussion on this.
Mr. Secretary, I just want to follow up. You said that the teams have been going back and forth. but can you confirm whether or not a tentative agreement has been reached in these negotiations with Iran?
Again, everything depends on what the president wants to do, and President Trump is not going to make a bad deal for the American people, for the U.S., and he was very clear at the cabinet meeting on the yesterday what he wants.
Secretary Bessent, Kara from Lintel TV. I'm sorry, did I steal his question? Because I'm not that person.
No, it's you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for taking my question, Kara from Lintel TV. I really wanted to get your thoughts on digital currency. A lot of our viewers are increasingly worried that digital currency could one day be used to track people's spending or limit personal freedom. What's your philosophy on that, and what safeguards is the Treasury and this administration putting in place to make sure new digital payment systems protect Americans' privacy and freedoms in the future?
Well, so this administration has been very clear. There will be no central bank digital currency, which I think would be the first step toward tracking. So we have taken that off the table. We've passed stablecoin legislation with bipartisan, and the Clarity Act is now up on the Hill, and I think it has bipartisan support. And the most important thing we can do is to make digital assets come into the United States, make the U.S. the home. Our regulation, our best practices are what will ensure good standards for these. When you look at digital assets, all the nonsense that happens, all the things you read about, that's because it's the wild, wild west offshore, so we got to bring it on shore. So I would encourage the House and the Senate to get clarity done. Jack?
A lot of people talking about the IRS settlement, and which has been rolled over now into this weaponization fund over at DOJ. Wanted to get your comment on the decision process, as much as you can tell, how that settlement came to be, how it was rolled over to DOJ, and then the process for those funds now as it's played out.
Good. So thank you for the question. This is going to be the only question I'll take on this matter today. So there's ongoing litigation, so it'd be inappropriate for me to comment. President Trump is a great American who has endured more than 10 years of nonstop harassment and weaponization from the federal and state government actors. A bad actor at the IRS leaked more than 400,000 tax returns, including the Trump family, all the employees, and that's how we got here now. No American should be targeted for political reasons, and every citizen deserves fair treatment and full protection of the law. The Department of Justice represented Treasury and the IRS in this matter, and I'm going to have to refer any questions to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. So.
Thanks. So President Trump has said that we can expect interest rates to come down very quickly. A number of times he did that last week. But the market at the moment broadly does not expect any rate cuts this year. You know, JP Morgan said this, Morgan Stanley, and so on. So who is right, the president or the market?
Well, I think, again, I believe that we will get through this challenging period now. On higher prices. On the other side of this, I've said publicly that I think we'll be back to substantial disinflation. But most importantly, I think we've got the Warsh Fed now. It's a new day at the Fed. The Treasury Secretary and the Fed Chair have lunch or breakfast every week. I had my first breakfast with Chair Warsh this morning, and I believe that he will do the right thing to balance inflation and growth.
Thank you, Secretary Bessent. I hope you were calling on me.
Yes.
So I'd like to ask you if you could provide a little more detail on what you're doing to shut down Iran's airlines, and also on sanctions relief. A senior administration official briefed reporters over the weekend that sanctions relief will be commensurate with nuclear concessions. But at some point, if the enriched uranium is given up, should we expect pallets of cash to be flown to Iran? Could you describe how that looks?
Well, a couple of things. On the airlines, one thing that we're not going to do is restrict movement for religious reasons. So Iranians who want to make the pilgrimage to Mecca or Medina will be allowed. We will also allow valid humanitarian reasons. But the other thing we can do is that when these airlines fly, they have to be refueled. They sell tickets. They pay landing fees. Anyone who accepts those, we will sanction. So they should be very clear that the state-owned Iranian airlines, they are outlaws and cannot do this.
Secretary.
Since you're the White House briefer today, I know you've been asked this already, but I'm wondering if you can just confirm on the record that there is a tentative deal that has been agreed for a 60-day extension of the ceasefire and then a continuation of nuclear talks.
Again, it's always a mistake to get out ahead of the president, so it is all going to be the president's decision. I think that we can see that the president very clearly stated his three: the open the Strait, highly enriched uranium, no nuclear program. So
are those things part of the temporary deal right now, sir? Are those three aspects that you just outlined part of the temporary deal that has been agreed?
That if there can be no deal without those, why would there be a deal without those?
Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for taking the time. President Trump at the cabinet meeting said he thought that reducing fraud would help to balance the budget. You put out the goal of getting the deficit to 3% of GDP. What's your timeline for achieving that? And how do you think what can you say to make the markets, given where rates are, like kind of process kind of what your plan and agenda is?
Well, the GAO numbers, not my numbers, believe that there's about $500 billion a year of fraud. So could we very quickly get $250 billion of that? The budget deficit is approximately $1.8 trillion. So that would reduce the deficit substantially. If we could get that $500 billion number, I think it would engender confidence. You'd probably also go into a virtuous cycle. As the budget deficit narrowed, interest rates would go down. No one reports it, but last year we actually had a fiscal contraction. Just to remind everyone, we inherited the worst budget deficit in history when we were not in a recession or not at war, 6.7%. We brought that down to about 5.5 or 5.4% this year. I think we can stay on a good trajectory.
Mr. Secretary, without an executive order, does the U.S. government have adequate defenses in place to address the risk created by Anthropic's new AI models?
We have great collaboration between all of the labs that have the large language models, but between the U.S. government and the labs. So,
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Yep.
Is me? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Appreciate it. First, did you speak with the president before this briefing? Did he show any willingness to this 60-day ceasefire extension?
I haven't seen the president today.
And then I just want to follow up. When can Americans, the average American, and can the U.S. economy work for the average American without a deal with Iran?
Again, I believe we've already seen oil prices come down substantially. We are pumping more oil than we've ever seen before. And as I said, these are short-term challenges that we will get over, and I think we'll move forward. In the white?
Mr. Secretary, just to follow up.
No, in the white.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Appreciate it. Given how much this upcoming midterm election will hinge on the economy, what did you think about President Trump's comments in the cabinet meeting yesterday saying he didn't care about the midterms?
So you're calling President Trump a statesman? You're saying that he is taking a statesman-like position, that he has a core belief, and he believes that the most important thing is for Iran never to have a nuclear weapon. So I believe both things can be true, that we can do well in the midterms, that we perhaps have the makings of a deal here, and I believe that, and look, the economy, that it is challenging now, but unemployment is still low, tax refunds were high, and consumer spending is still quite high. So in my private business over the years, I always looked at what were consumers doing, not what they were saying. And I'm in constant contact with the banks, and every income quintile is still doing well. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. On the $250 bill, Mr. Secretary, you said the legalities of it are up on Capitol Hill, but I just wonder what your opinion is personally. Do you think it's a good idea for the president to put his face on America?
Again, the president doesn't do it. The House and the Senate have to do it.
Secretary Bessent, Secretary Bessent, what are the remaining assurances that President Trump needs to see in order for him to sign off on the agreement with Iran?
I don't think it could be clear.
You're following in the footsteps at the podium there of Secretary Rubio and Vice President Vance. There's been quite a lot of talk about their possible presidential ambitions. Does your presence here today indicate that we might see you running in 2020?
No, I think it just means they've run out of things on the food chain.
There's been some back and forth over the last several days, and also with the U.S. attacking Iranian drones yesterday. This morning, CENTCOM put out a statement that Iran had launched its ballistic missile towards Kuwait, calling it an egregious ceasefire violation. How can the administration still argue that a ceasefire is in effect?
With the Iranian government, we did not have regime change, but we changed the regime. As President Trump said at the cabinet meeting, as we've said other times, the first layer of leadership was eliminated, the second layer, and we're now at the third layer. And the way to think about it is the Iranian government, such as it is three pillars. It is the elected government, it is the IRGC, and it is the clerics. And they are having trouble communicating. So we are being patient. We do not have unlimited patience. President Trump always prefers a peace deal. So everything we have done thus far has been defensive. And at present, that is what we will continue doing. But if President Trump doesn't think he can get a peace deal, then Connecticut is back.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Are you hopeful that the oil prices will go down once this conflict is over, given the fact that the Strait of Hormuz remain closed, and by the time this oil gets to the major markets, it could be 2 or 3 months?
Again, we see that the market, I believe, is very well supplied right now. The market seems to be going into balance for itself. So I think that as the Strait opens up, we're going to see this burst of ships come out. So we may actually see how quickly can it be refined, how quickly can it get to its destination.
Thank you so much, Alina Shirazi from the Daily Mail. You wrote resilience on your cabinet note meetings. Several times the photographer zoomed into it. Are you trying to keep the president calm? Are you trying to keep yourself calm? Why did you write all those notes?
So people could look over my shoulder, photograph them, and think they got a scoop. So,
Is the United States considering a reconstruction program for Iran if a deal is signed?
Again, I think we got to get to the deal before we get to the other side. Before we get to you in the pink.
Mr. Secretary, in the red?
No, in the pink.
In the pink, thank you. Cristina Londoño with Telemundo Network. Mr. Secretary, how effective do you believe the current Treasury restrictions have been in pressuring the Cuban government? And also, if you're in the room when those talks are being held, are there any plans to either tighten the sanctions or to ease the sanctions against the Cuban government to get some type of change?
Again, that's going to be up to the Cuban government. That they can go up, they can go down. That we've tried to get humanitarian aid in, and the regime rejected it. So because they wanted to go through their corrupt system. So they could go up, they could go down. It's carrot and stick. Secretary Rubio doing a fantastic job of managing this process, and we at Treasury are working with him. So, in the red.
Thank you. Reagan Reese with the Daily Caller. I want to ask you about Antifa. In October, the Treasury Department started working with the FBI to investigate who's funding Antifa. Can you give us an update on that investigation? How close are you guys to finding out Who's funding it?
It is ongoing. We made substantial progress, and I think in the weeks and months ahead, we're going to have a lot to report. One thing that did go underreported that I would point out to all of you is the IRS is now giving guidance on the Form 990, which nonprofits they have to file. And we are going to encourage or demand that nonprofits know their grant recipients. So if a grant recipient is violent, if they are suppressing people's rights, then you are responsible for that. And I think that's a very good first step.
There's new government data that shows that Americans are now saving a smaller share of their incomes than at any time over the past 4 years. Are you seeing signs that American households are dipping into their savings to pay for the higher costs of things like gas and groceries? And does data like that concern you right now?
Well, so a lower academic literature would tell you a lower savings rate can mean one of two things. The kind of the doomer view that you took, or that people have more confidence, or it could be something else because, for instance, stock market gains or 401k gains might not show up in savings, so they're looking at that, think that they can draw down their household savings.
You're obviously concerned about the risks posed by advanced AI models like Mythos to critical infrastructure. The financial sector is concerned as well. What types of changes are being considered to the AI executive order so it could pass? And do you believe that an AI executive order needs to include the pre-public access for government?
Again, we're working very closely with the large language labs. They've been excellent partners, and we are going to get a solution that solves for the maximum calculus. What we want to do, the U.S. is the AI leader in the world. We're an AI superpower. China is second. They are trailing substantially. We want to make sure that we keep that lead. So we are working on the exact calculus between innovation and safety, and we want to optimize for that. So you in the glasses.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
In the glasses.
Thank you very much.
No, you don't have glasses on. You in the glasses.
Thank you for taking my question. There was a report this morning that Justice Alito's son is working in your department. Can you confirm that that's the case? And if so, do you believe that that means that he should be, that the justice should recuse himself from cases that involve your department?
I am sure that Mr. Alito follows all legal and ethical guidelines, and I can assure you that at Treasury we follow all the legal and ethical guidelines.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I have two questions for you, but just to follow what you said about the
well, you didn't call me doctor, so I only get one.
I'll shoot for two. You said that it's up to Congress. The president's face is on a $250 bill, but it is actually the Washington Post that's reporting two political appointees from the Treasury Department who have asked agencies to be ready to do that. Do you think politically it's a good idea to put his face on a $250 bill when people are struggling to afford gas and groceries?
I don't really understand this Washington Post article. That who hears from the Post? Yeah, terribly written, terribly edited. Because basically what it says is that Treasury is following the law, and that we've created the bill, and that it's up to Congress, but that we follow the bill and it's up to. I didn't really understand what the story was.
So,
but anyway.
Appointees aren't involved in that, two of your political appointees?
Yeah, of course, but we prepare for everything if it gets passed. Just like we were ready 6 months in advance for the one big beautiful bill for tax guidance. So we have to prepare in advance. You can't draw something up the day before.
Politically, do you think it's a good idea though when people are struggling to afford gas and groceries?
Look, I think it has. I think that it's bifurcated. That do you think we should have a 250th anniversary, the celebration?
Well, that's happening anyway, but putting the president's face on a $250 bill is a choice.
But Caitlin, it's not happening anyway. It's happening because it's being funded by private citizens, by the federal government, by state governments, by municipal governments to celebrate our country. And I don't think that there's anything untoward about having the President of the United States, the person who was President of the United States, on the 250th anniversary bill.
Secretary, this is my second question.
On Russia sanctions.
What you just commented on there, Mr. Secretary,
about the $1.8 billion fund. Is it accurate that the general counsel of the Treasury Department resigned over that?
I will not be taking any other questions, I will not be taking any other questions.
Wall Street over here.
So,
On the sanctions, sir, given the scale of the assault from Russia on Kyiv in recent days and the fact that diplomacy seems to have settled down, there is no diplomatic talks happening right now between Russia, Ukraine, or the U.S. What about sanctions? Is the U.S. considering sanctions on Russia at this time?
well, the U.S., this administration has put the hardest sanctions on Russia of any country. So let's review how the sanctions regime has gone since the Russian action on Ukraine. Biden administration put on what I would call mild sanctions because they were worried about gasoline prices going up into an election. It would be an unstatesmanlike sanctions. Probably the worst national security advisor in the history of the country, Jake Sullivan, in an act of bravery on his way out the door in January, raised the sanction level on behalf of the Trump administration. We let those in situ when we took office. Fast forward to October, and President Trump instructed me to sanction the two largest Russian oil companies, Lukoil and Rosneft, which we did. No other government has done that. So no one has done more sanctions than the Trump administration on Russian oil. Here, who wants to own this? Gray hair. No, gray hair. No, you don't have gray hair. Oh, maybe you do.
When you had breakfast this morning with Fed Chair, did you request that the Fed lower interest rates?
I had breakfast with Chair Powell 41 times, and I never did that. Last question.
Thanks, sir. Governor Gavin Newsom has floated this idea of a 100% state tax on Californians who receive money from President Trump's anti-weaponization fund. Your response to the governor's call for 100% tax?
There's no cure for stupid.
Mr. Secretary.
Okay. Thank you all.
All right, that was obviously Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent taking questions in place of Caroline Leavitt at the White House. I'm Matt Miller with Alexis Christoforous. We're in for Tim Stenevec and Carol Master today, but quite a lot of information there from the Treasury Secretary, and he seemed in a very good mood as well.
Yeah, he was, cracking some jokes there as well. This was a wide-ranging press briefing. He started out talking about the Trump accounts, where the government's going to gift $1,000 seed investment to newborns if people sign up. That's going to happen July 4th. He talked about the average refund for folks this year with their taxes.
$3,300, 11% higher than the same refund that they got last year.
Yeah, average 401k up 30% since Trump, $30,000, I should say, since the inauguration. Unemployment rate 4.3%. So he sort of started by highlighting all that is good.
Not far off 30%, by the way. I would think it's about 19% actually.
You know what? We're going to check your math, but I bet you're right. I bet you're right, Matt. But of course, he was asked repeatedly, is there a deal on the table between the U.S. and Iran? He sort of skirted that. He again said that the president has 3 stipulations here. One of them, the Strait needs to be opened. Iran cannot have a nuclear program, and they need to surrender their enriched uranium.
Yeah. And he refused to go much further on that. He wouldn't verify, he wouldn't confirm or deny whether or not the Axios report that the U.S. and Iran have reached an agreement on an extension of the ceasefire has been reached. The president, according to Axios, says he needs a few days to deliberate on that.
He also said he had breakfast with Kevin Warsh, the new Fed chair.
He had breakfast with Kevin Warsh. He said he had breakfast with Jerome Powell 41 times and never asked him to lower interest rates. I think the implication is that he wouldn't have asked Warsh that either. He did say a couple of things. There will be no CBDC. There will be no central bank digital currency under this administration. He talked about the attempt to put President Trump's face on a $250 bill to mark the 250th anniversary of the United States. Interesting that George Washington strongly objected to having his face on U.S. currency because he thought it looked too much like sort of the royal leaders of Europe. And of course, there's an amendment that you can't have a living person on U.S. currency.
But the administration is trying to have that rolled back.
They're trying to lift that law
Right.
for this president, who probably doesn't have the same objections to his likeness on a currency. So I think a really interesting press conference, although the most important questions he was asked probably were on the $1.8 billion weaponization fund, which also grants President Trump and his family members and his business immunity, no more IRS audits for them, and no more federal lawsuits against them in perpetuity. He referred all of those questions to Todd Blanche and didn't answer any further questions.
And, I was looking at the market while all this was going on. Not a lot changed while Scott Bessent was talking, but why don't we hand it over to Charlie Pellet now for a wider look at what's going on in the market. Charlie.
All right. Thank you very much, Alexis and Matt. Indeed, while Dr. Bessent was talking, we did see the Dow Jones Industrial Average decline. Little change, though, as you say, while the actual press conference was underway. S&P 500 index holding at a record, up 40 right now at 75.60. That is a gain there of just about 0.5%. NASDAQ pushing higher at a record, up 236, up by about 0.9%. And the NASDAQ Composite Index, also right now at a record. NASDAQ 100 Index also advancing by about 0.8%. Right now we are looking at a rally in oil that is waning. West Texas Intermediate crude, though, holding on to a gain of 0.7%, 89.33 a barrel. Brent 94.10, lower now by 0.2%. The VIX trading below 16. We've got the SOX gaining again today, back to its winning ways, up 1.3%. The 10-year 4.45%, the 2-year 4.02%, and the 30-year 4.98%. So again, recapping here, the Dow lower, down 0.2%, S&P up by 0.5%. Matt and Alexis, that's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, thanks so much, Charlie. I want to check in with Dan Flatley now, Bloomberg News U.S. Treasury reporter for us there in D.C. So, Dan, you were listening to what we were just listening to, Scott Bessent there at the White House. I'm going to start with this. Did anything surprise you that he said this afternoon?
Well, one of the more interesting things he said, Alexis, was that this proposal that was reported on earlier by the Washington Post about President Trump's face appearing on a $250 bill was something that would be decided by Congress. There's some legislation up there that's sort of languished over the last year or so, and he said that the Treasury Department would follow the law, which requires that, one, no living person appear on any U.S. currency, and two, that the currency says "In God We Trust." So he made those remarks, which was kind of something new in terms of that story. We didn't get much in terms of the deal with Iran, only to say that he does see that his Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent does see a deal imminent, and gas prices and some of the other price pressures coming off a bit. But of course, that all remains to be seen.
He also argued, Dan, that the Trump administration has put heftier sanctions on Russian oil than any administration in history, obviously in the history of the entire universe. But haven't those sanctions been lifted ever since our excursion into the Middle East?
Yeah, that's a great point, Matt. So yeah, I think he's, it's all kind of a matter of perspective, but earlier in President Trump's second term, going back to last fall, some of the sanctions that were put on Lukoil and Rosneft were considered to be some pretty draconian measures that were taken, and I think at the time people were impressed by that. Of course, as you point out, there have been successive waivers. I think we're now on our third waiver for some of that oil that has already been loaded onto tankers. And so I think that there were some frustrations last week. Actually, I was in Paris for the G7 meeting from the Ukrainians and from some of the U.S.'s European allies that the U.S. wasn't going harder on some of the sanctions related to Russia. But as you mentioned, the situation in Iran and in the Persian Gulf and in that region has really complicated those types of economic tools.
It's interesting because this administration argues so often that we are energy independent, and the problems in terms of oil transporting or not through the Strait of Hormuz are the problems of the Europeans and the Asian countries who aren't helping us there. So why would we bother to lift sanctions on Russian oil?
Yeah, it's a great question, Matt. I think that there's again, it sort of depends on what part of the globe you're looking at this situation from. But certainly there's some frustration among some of the U.S.'s allies, as I mentioned, that the U.S. has undertaken this war, essentially, in the Middle East to accomplish some goals that were a bit muddled at the outset. Now we're talking about nuclear talks. Secretary Bessent said that this was the first time that Iran has come to the table to discuss their nuclear program. I'm not sure that that's strictly true. Obviously, there was a negotiation over the nuclear program in 2014 and 15 under the JCPOA. But be that as it may, there's certainly some conflicting goals, and to put economic pressure on Iran may mean that you have to relieve some economic pressure on Russia in order to keep sort of the global price of oil tamped down a bit. And so I think that you have those competing priorities, and there's some frustration from the U.S.'s part, obviously, that the Europeans and some other allies are not joining in on the fight with Iran.
Yep.
But at the same time, they're frustrated with the U.S. on Russia.
All right, Dan Flatley, Bloomberg News U.S. Treasury reporter there for us in D.C. We appreciate it. Thanks so much. And we're going to have much more coming up here, including continuing to dissect these comments from Treasury Secretary Bessent, who said oil's going to bounce back relatively quickly once a deal is had. We're back after this.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
Welcome back to Businessweek Daily. I'm Alexis Christoforous, in for Carol Massar, here with Matt Miller as well.
In for Tim Stenovec.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to read a hotline that's coming over the terminal here. MLB owners have proposed a salary cap for the first time since baseball's strike back in 1994-95. I guess another attempt to level the playing field.
Do you watch baseball?
I do watch baseball. Are you a baseball guy?
I find it unbelievably boring. Like
a
little bit more exciting than
soccer,
road? But not much. Yeah.
All right. Well, it is a slower game. I'll give you that much.
Even when I go to the field, I just don't really have that much fun.
Well, regardless, Matt, they're looking at proposing a salary cap. We're going to see what that means for the teams.
Bring A-Rod back. That's what I say.
That might make it a little interesting. Might make it even slower. He's aged a little bit, but all right. I think we want to get to some stock movers. They're telling us. Avalon Purnell here in our Interactive Broker studio. Avalon, let's start with, you brought some goodies with you. Snowflake having quite the day on Wall Street.
Absolutely. That's ticker SNO. Currently, it's surging about 39% and is on pace for its biggest one-day jump since its debut in 2020. That's after the software maker gave a stronger than expected full-year guidance and also reported first quarter results that walloped expectations. Also worth noting that the company signed a $6 billion multi-year agreement to use Amazon's cloud services and chips. And Evercore's writing that, unlike some of the other names that have really been sluggish for software, Snowflake looks like one of the very few clear AI winners in the space.
It's so crazy because the story had been AI disruption to software providers, and now AI has become a tailwind for this software provider. I can't believe it's only the biggest one-day jump since 2020. So there's been another day on which Snowflake stock has risen more than 40%?
To be fair, it is actually, their debut happened in 2020.
Oh, I see. Okay, so biggest one-day jump ever. We also have incredible strength in Dollar Tree, and clearly inflation is a problem that we've been dealing with for some time now. Concerns about the bottom portion of the K-shaped economy have been growing. But why did it take so long for the market to recognize that they may be shopping at discount stores like Dollar Tree?
You're absolutely correct. That's ticker DLTR, currently gaining about 16% for its also biggest intraday leap since 2022. That's after the chain reported better than expected first quarter results and also boosted its full year EPS guidance. Now, what is kind of important of note, kind of to your point about those lower income shoppers, they actually have been stepping into the stores less. However, the times that they are going, they are spending more. So to a certain extent, they are still seeing Dollar Tree as a must go.
So they're spending more per transaction.
Correct.
Which is the meat, right, of this report.
Apparently
here.
the goods there also increasingly cost more than $1.
Yes, so their name does not hold true anymore.
It should be Dollar's Tree.
Dollar's Tree, I think you're right. But also they weren't, just to be fair, I know you didn't bring these stocks along with you today, but Kohl's and Best Buy, very different retailers from Dollar Tree, but still out with really strong numbers today. And again, we just keep coming back to that word resilient, but despite high gas prices, despite inflation that is, trending higher, consumers appear to be spending, but they are still looking for value. And I think that's what each CEO continued to drive home.
You're absolutely right. We actually had a great article about that on the terminal as well, that in this economy, really right now, shoppers are looking for the best of their dollar, and they're still seeing Dollar Tree as a place
so
where
they'll spend
they can get a
as long
good
as they
bang of
see
their
value in the spending.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
It's funny that you bring up resilient, because a buddy of mine who runs a company called Resilient Health, Dinesh Nagda, has been telling me for days now that Lilly has got something in its pipeline that's going to be a game changer as far as heart conditions. They've got a one-stop treatment that can help you avoid bad cholesterol. And they also made a bunch of acquisitions this week. Like, there's so much going on with this stock. What's the story with Eli Lilly?
Absolutely. That's ticker LLY. You're absolutely right. It's currently up about 4.5%. Earlier today, actually hitting an intraday record high.
Wow.
And that's after CVS said that it will be reintroducing the company's weight loss drug, Zepbound, to its patients as a covered medication. That's a really big deal, since insurance coverage remains the biggest hurdle for getting more people on those weight loss shots. And Scotiabank actually writing that the decision is a really great positive tailwind for Lilly, especially into the second half of the year. That could potentially mean some upside to their guidance for the full year.
And this week they bought 3 infectious disease companies, all privately held, right? And that the stock got a big bounce off that
$4 billion worth of acquisitions.
$4 billion worth, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, Big Pharma is always trying to look for the next thing. What is going to be the next big weight loss, especially as certain things are going to be coming and losing their patent protection. Eli Lilly, like many others,
so they're expanding beyond the very lucrative obesity drug arena.
Have to go to the next one as well. Yes.
You know what's interesting? So I always look at Eli Lilly versus Novo Nordisk, which invented this segment, right? Over the past 5 years, which is my default because that's what the comp function on a Bloomberg
there you go.
defaults to, and I feel like it's fair to always choose the same length. Eli Lilly's stock is up 466%, whereas Novo is only up 22%.
I mean, go figure. They somehow just,
dropped the ball.
Dropped the ball, to say the least. All right.
Avalon
Purnell, thank you so much for being with us and for bringing us those stock movers. We appreciate it. All right, coming up next, we're actually going to have a good conversation here with Jay Chowdhury, founder and CEO of Zscaler. That's that cybersecurity platform. And man, the stock got hit yesterday.
Yeah, they said that they would have, I think, annual recurring revenue growth of 16 or 17%, which sounds good.
Still wasn't enough.
Not enough. For those of you watching on television, by the way, the close will be up next with Romaine Bostic and Katie Greifeld. Stick with us, though, on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg Businessweek continues there.